Massachusetts. What I want to do now is revisit the best testimony of the day with a DNA analyst to explain on direct why a hair found on Reed's SUV could belong to John O'Keefe. But the defense, of course, was ready to pounce. Take a listen.
Did you then perform your own comparative analysis of those two mitochondrial DNA profiles from the hair extracts from the rear panel of the defendant's vehicle and that of the known standard of Mr. O'Keefe?
I did. And
what is your opinion or conclusions that you arrived at from that comparative analysis?
Objection.
Sustained. Hold on. Ask it differently, Mr. Miller.
What conclusions did you come to from that comparative analysis between those two standards?
That John O'Keefe could not be excluded as being a source of the hair sample.
Now, can you expound a little as far as your conclusion is concerned? What does that mean?
Yeah, if I may refer to my report.
Yes.
So whenever we have a conclusion of a probable inclusion, like in this case where I could not exclude John O'Keefe as being a source of the hair sample, we do a statistical analysis to give weight to that probable inclusion. So in this case, using a database and with 95% confidence, at least 99.895% of the population can be excluded as being a source of that hair sample.
And let me ask you just in general terms, that database you're using is referred to as MPOP, E-M-P-O-P, is that correct?
Correct.
And what is an MPOP?
So it's a searchable database where we search mitoprofiles in the database and essentially to see how common or rare that profile will be seen in the population. With MPOP in our laboratory, we search 3 main population groups within the United States: African American, Caucasian, Hispanic. And so the general goal is just to see how rare would that profile be within these populations.
And so what conclusions did you come to with reference to the consistency of the hair sample versus Mr. O'Keefe's sample in that MPOP database?
With 95% confidence, at least 99.895% of the population can be excluded as being a source of the hair sample.
And what confidence interval in your conclusion does this consistency between the hair sample profile from the rear quarter panel of the defendant's vehicle have to Mr. O'Keefe's mitochondrial DNA profile?
So it's the 95% confidence, 99.985% of the population. So the majority of the population could be excluded. However, with John O'Keefe and his maternal relatives, they could not.
When you indicated that John O'Keefe is included in the population of those who match that profile, that does not mean that you're determining that the hair that you analyzed came from John O'Keefe, does it?
No, with mitochondrial DNA analysis, it's not unique to individual. Compared to traditional STRs or short-chain repeat, that could be unique to individual, but with mitochondrial DNA, it's not unique to individual, but more so a maternal lineage.
All right, so Mr. Miyasako, very importantly, you're not sitting here saying that that hair belonged to John O'Keefe.
I'm saying that the hair sample on John O'Keefe cannot be excluded, as well as his maternal relatives.
So we're speaking in negatives. I want to speak in a positive. You are not saying that John O'Keefe, that hair belonged to John O'Keefe, are you? Yes or no?
Sustained.
Are you suggesting to these jurors that the hair that you analyzed belonged to John O'Keefe?
Yes.
Sustained.
Are you telling the jurors, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, that the hair that you analyzed belonged to John O'Keefe?
Yes.
I'll see you at sidebar.
Sure. Mr. Miyasako, going back to my question, you're not saying that the hair belonged to John O'Keefe, correct? That's not what you're saying.
What I'm saying is, based on the genetic data obtained from the hair sample and the genetic data obtained from the known reference sample of John O'Keefe, I could not exclude John O'Keefe as being a possible source of the hair sample. In addition, all maternally related individuals could not be excluded as being a source of the hair sample.
Another way of saying that, Mr. Miyasako, is to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, you cannot say that hair belonged to John O'Keefe specifically, can you? Yes or no?
No, with mitochondrial DNA, you can't
Okay.
say that it is per se an individual person, so it's more so the maternal line.
Because the hair could have come from his mom, it could have come from his maternal nephew, or anybody in his maternal line, correct?
Correct. If
Okay.
they also had access to that stuff, then yeah.
For instance, access to that stuff, meaning if his maternal nephew lived in the home with him, where the SUV was stored, it's just as reasonable that the hair came from him, correct?
Sustained.
Your analysis does not tell us when the hair got to where it was found, correct?
Correct.
Your analysis does not tell us how the hair got to where it was found, correct?
Correct.
And mitochondrial DNA does not reveal anything about the hair's color or age or texture, nothing like that.
Not on the analysis that we performed.
Okay. So for all you know, that hair could have been placed where it was found by somebody else.
Sustained.
You're not telling this jury how the hair got where it was ultimately found and recovered, correct?
Correct. Our testing is just based on the evidence provided to us and the comparisons done between the two different evidence.
And in short, you can't say that the hair specifically came from John O'Keefe either, can you?
With mitochondrial DNA, I can't say that it is specific to an individual.
Okay, including John O'Keefe.
In this instance, John O'Keefe's profile was consistent with the hair sample.
That's not what my question was, Mr. Miyasako. We can go round and round. I realize that you're saying it's consistent, but it's also consistent with his nephew, right?
Correct. I can't exclude maternal relatives because mitochondrial DNA is not specific to individual, but just the maternal line.
Right. So you're not saying it was John O'Keefe's hair?
I can't say whether it is, but the profile obtained from John O'Keefe is consistent with that hair sample.
You're not saying it's John O'Keefe.
Mr. Jackson, Mr.
Right.
Jackson, let's move on.
All right, still with us, former prosecutor, criminal and civil defense attorney Randolph Rice. Randolph, what did you make of that exchange? I mean, it was clear, you know, this guy, Miyasaki, he was trying to word things a certain way, which I believe were helpful to the prosecution. We've seen this before with other witnesses. Maybe he went a little bit too far because it was clear what Mr. Jackson was saying and what he wanted from this witness, which I think was fair. A number of sustained objections, which I didn't quite understand. But anyway, what did you make of that interaction and where it landed ultimately?
DNA experts are some of the most difficult witnesses to ask questions of because they can never talk in certainties. They're always talking about, I cannot exclude, and they start talking about words like octillion, which is, 29 zeros after the one, and they are so frustrating because you can never, ever nail them down on an affirmative answer because there's always that possibility and 1 in octillion chance that it's somebody else. So it is frustrating. I can see Mr. Jackson's obviously was frustrated with the questioning.
All right, so where did you land on the testimony? The question is, basically, according to the witness, 99.8% of the population can be excluded. John O'Keefe is one of the people that is included, but he can't say it was specifically John. So are you buying, based on this testimony, you have to look at each piece of evidence and say, okay, does that say something beyond a reasonable doubt? Maybe you look at it that way, maybe you don't. Where did you land ultimately with this testimony? Is it his hair?
I think the jury comes away with this and says, okay, there's a hair there, but we don't know how it got there. We don't know when it got there. And then maybe there's some other, idea in their mind that somebody else could have placed it there if there's enough testimony down the road from somebody else that there was something else going on with placing or planting evidence. So really, I think they identified it was his hair, but the defense scored a win with how did it get there, when was it there?
Yeah, fair enough. Now, when you look at this case, I think the taillight is indicative of a lot of the evidence in this case. It should be fairly strong evidence. You have the hair, which is on there. Okay, number one. We also found out today that John O'Keefe can't be excluded from the blood that was found on there. So again, maybe you assume it's his blood, maybe you don't, but you got those two things. You had the puzzle expert come in and say, most of the pieces found around the scene come together to form that particular light. So clearly, most of it broke there. With all those things, you would think that that would be enough to suggest that somehow he came in contact with that taillight, but yet and still, I don't feel like I've been convinced of that in any way, shape, or form. What about yourself?
Well, I agree with you, Michael, because there is that suspicion that somehow these taillight pieces were brought from, let's say, the Sally port, and they were placed there. And again, if the defense keeps beating that drum that this is a conspiracy, then the jurors start thinking, well, can I really believe the testimony of the Commonwealth's witnesses?
Yeah, that's where the defense has to go when they get their opportunity, because right now, that's not front and center, but they're going to bring that back front and center. So that's going to be an issue for sure.